Our forecasts do envisage that euro-dollar moves lower over the course of the year. So we've got a 105 target for the euro by year end. But that story is more, I think, one that's based on the respective monetary policy stances between the ECB and the Fed. And our forecast at the moment is that the Fed's going to deliver 50 points of tightening before the end of the year. And that's the sort of major dynamic in an environment where the ECB is still doing QE, how we see euro-dollar going lower.
That's a fairly aggressive forecast, is it not, Sally, given that we've just heard from the Federal Reserve this week and we may hear more from the Fed tonight when Janet Yellen has her speech with regards to her views on what's going on, not just in Greece, but also in China?
No, that's exactly right. And I think it's fair to say that that forecast is heavily contingent on the Federal Reserve realising the sort of forecast we have pencilled in. I guess one of the things that we are a little bit concerned about at JP Morgan is this idea that the US economy is using up labour slack much more quickly than I think the Fed realises. So, we're already looking at an unemployment rate which is sort of where the Fed thought it would be at the end of 2015. And in fact, when you look at our forecast for where that unemployment rate is going in 2016, we see it trading with a 4 handle. So in that sort of environment, we think that that will ultimately dictate what the Fed does or doesn't do. And while we keep getting pretty constructive numbers on the US labour market, we actually think that is consistent with this idea, assuming no sort of disaster in Europe over the weekend and some sort of, 6.5% to 7% sort of growth rate in China, that will be consistent with Fed tightening this year.
Okay, if that is the case, if that is your view on what's going on right now, how do you play the Aussie dollar? I mean, we're right below where the RBA initially put their line on the sand of 75, 74.88. It's been under quite a bit of pressure this week. A little bit of a recovery in the course of the session today. Is this a good place to be picking up the Aussie dollar, or do you need to wait for the volatility in China to settle down to see how that's going to influence economic growth?
Yeah, we actually like being short the Aussie dollar, so we're sort of forecasting Aussie down to the low 70s by the end of the year. At the moment, we think the best short is Aussie versus yen. We just don't think there's enough risk premium priced into commodity currencies, given how poorly commodities have been trading over the last couple of weeks. And our sort of sense is that where commodities are right now, give or take, is sort of consistent with, 6 to 7% growth in China. And I guess, one would probably argue that risks to those numbers are biased to the downside. So we think from a risk premium perspective and also from a just a uncomfortableness about the way commodities are trading, does make sense to be short commodity currencies. So we like CAD yen lower, we like Aussie yen lower. And I think even though the currency is sort of where Stevens had said he'd like to see it, we've got to remember that those comments were made a good 6 months ago. And things have probably changed since then. The outlook for Chinese growth has certainly deteriorated. Iron ore prices are trading at new lows. In recent sessions. So I'm not sure that benchmark of 75 cents is sort of going to do it for the RBA. And our sense is that they would be viewing the currency right here and now as probably about fair value.